You have exactly 30 seconds to explain why your grass looks like it belongs in the Amazon rainforest before I call the HOA, the city inspector, and possibly the fire department. That was the greeting I received one fine Saturday morning before I could even sip my coffee. Standing at the edge of my front lawn, dressed in a perfectly ironed beige pantsuit, was Brenda, the self-proclaimed warden of our neighborhood. She wasn't holding a clipboard this time. No, this time she had a literal stopwatch, clicking it dramatically as if my front yard were part of some illegal horticultural experiment. I blinked, half in disbelief and half trying to comprehend how my slightly overgrown fescue could have summoned the wrath of suburban law enforcement. It was grass, green, alive, maybe 3 inches taller than my neighbor's obsessively scalped yard, but still just grass. I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut me off like a judge swinging a gavel. 25 seconds left. Don't waste them. Now, I consider myself a pretty patient guy. I don't ruffle easily. I enjoy the calm things in life, slow jazz, early morning gardening, and watching squirrels fight over acorns. But something about this woman made every cell in my body vibrate with annoyance. It wasn't the first time Brenda had inserted herself into my life like a poorly coded pop-up ad. She'd complained when my Halloween pumpkins weren't aesthetically aligned with community standards. She filed a noise complaint when I used an electric leaf blower at 11 a.m. on a Saturday. But this was a new level of unhinged. I gently placed my coffee cup on the porch railing, trying to preserve the last shreds of civility. "Brenda," I said, "it's just grass." She gasped like I'd insulted her ancestors. "Just grass? Just." She spun on her heel and marched off, muttering about ordinances and setting examples. I watched her retreat to her house, which looked like it had been peeled from a home magazine, right down to the plastic fruit basket on her patio. That's when I noticed her curtains twitching. She was watching me. Always watching. The official complaint arrived 3 days later, delivered in an envelope with the HOA's gold seal and Brenda's signature written, so large it needed 2 lines. "Your front lawn exceeds the maximum height allowed by HOA guidelines by approximately 0.75 inches. There was even a photo attached, complete with a little ruler poking through the grass. I don't know what disturbed me more, the effort it took to measure my lawn that precisely, or the realization that she probably did it in the middle of the night. I sighed and trimmed the grass that evening. I even double-checked the height just to avoid giving her more ammunition. For a moment, I thought maybe this would be the end of it. Maybe she'd move on to harass someone about their mailbox color or recycling bin placement. But no, Brenda was just getting started. A week later, another note appeared. This time, she claimed the shade of my grass was visually jarring and created an imbalance in the community aesthetic. I had to reread it 3 times to believe it. Apparently, the fertilizer I'd used made my grass a richer green than her preferred dull tone. She demanded I neutralize the vibrancy. I stared at the paper, unsure if I was living in a neighborhood or starring in an episode of some surreal reality show. I tried talking to her again, hoping for some kind of truce. I approached her during her morning walk, thinking surely, face to face, she'd see how ridiculous all this was. But Brenda just narrowed her eyes, pointed to a patch of clover growing near my driveway, and said, "That's a gateway weed. First clover, then dandelions, then chaos." She walked off before I could reply. That night, I sat on my porch sipping tea and silently wondering what I did to deserve a nemesis in my own zip code. My brother Leo stopped by and found me deep in lawn-induced existential crisis. After hearing the saga, he laughed so hard he nearly choked on his energy drink. "Bro, you should have just planted bamboo. Grows like 3 feet a day. Would have buried her roses in a week." He meant it as a joke, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Bamboo, fast-growing, legal, non-toxic, resilient, and best of all, untouchable under current HOA rules. I pulled up the HOA manual from our community website and searched for anything related to bamboo. Nothing. Zilch. No bans, no height restrictions, just a vague mention of non-invasive flora, and greenery must not pose physical hazards. I smirked. That was all I needed. What Brenda didn't realize, what she never bothered to consider, was that I'm not just some laid-back lawn guy. I'm a systems engineer. I live and breathe in loopholes. Where she saw a problem to crush, I saw a code to exploit. If she wanted a battle over nature, then fine. I would give her one, but not with anger. With patience, with strategy, with bamboo. Over the next few days, I did my research. I found a breed of clumping bamboo, non-invasive, fast-growing, and perfectly legal. I ordered the stock plants from a reputable nursery in Oregon. While I waited for delivery, I prepared the soil. I laid out the planting zones precisely where the sun would help it thrive and where it would eventually cast a shadow on Brenda's meticulously trimmed hydrangeas. When the boxes arrived, I felt like a villain in a movie unboxing his secret weapon. The bamboo was innocent-looking enough, short, leafy, nothing threatening. But I knew better. This stuff was botanical dynamite. As I planted the first shoot, I imagined the roots quietly taking hold, preparing for the unstoppable vertical sprint. Brenda peeked through her window again, probably assuming I was reseeding or planting tulips. "Oh, Brenda, you poor, rule-loving soul. You have no idea what you started." By the time the first shoots reached my waist, Brenda appeared again. She stood across the street, arms crossed, mouth slightly open. "What is that?" she demanded. I smiled sweetly. "Just a little something green. You know, embracing nature." Her eyes narrowed. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to calculate what ordinance she could possibly invoke. But she couldn't. Not yet. I had checked everything twice. This time, I wasn't giving her even a sliver of ammunition. Brenda turned and stomped away. I didn't even flinch, because the bamboo had just started. And this time, it wasn't the grass that would grow too tall. It was revenge. By the following week, my yard was beginning to look like something out of a National Geographic documentary. The bamboo, still technically under 2 feet tall, had started its rise with silent ambition. And while the leafy stalk swayed innocently in the breeze, I knew I had just introduced the botanical equivalent of a rocket launch into our sleepy suburban neighborhood. The funny part? It was all legal. Every stalk, every leaf, every inch of green rebellion was completely within the HOA's sacred code book, thanks in large part to Brenda's own sloppy legal drafting. See, the HOA rule book was a beast I had studied thoroughly. It was bloated with unnecessary clauses about mailbox uniformity and permitted shades of beige for garage doors. But when it came to actual plant regulations, it was as empty as Brenda's recycling bin the week after Earth Day. The only references to plant life involved maintaining reasonable curb appeal and avoiding thorny hazards. No height restrictions for bamboo, no bans on rapid-growing flora, not even a limit on how much one homeowner could plant. Brenda, in all her micromanaging glory, had created the perfect loophole-filled playground, and I was about to throw the biggest party it had ever seen. Planting the bamboo had become my quiet form of therapy. Every morning, I walked outside with my cup of tea, checked their progress, trimmed away any weak shoots, and encouraged the strong ones to grow taller. By day 10, they were over 4 feet tall. By day 15, they kissed 6 feet and were beginning to form a cozy green wall between our properties. Brenda's roses, once smugly visible from any point on the street, were now completely blocked by an emerald curtain of rebellion. She made her first move on a sunny Thursday afternoon. I had just returned from the hardware store when I noticed her standing at the edge of her lawn, arms crossed, and a man in a neon vest beside her, a landscaper. She wasn't even trying to be subtle. He was pointing at the bamboo, then to the HOA rule book she had printed out and highlighted like a deranged high school teacher. I waved. Brenda scowled. That evening, she left a note on my door, her preferred method of passive aggression. It was printed in bold capital letters and laminated, as if she thought I might cry on it from intimidation. According to her, the bamboo was psychologically disruptive, excessively tall, and known to cause property devaluation through aggressive vibes. Yes, she actually wrote aggressive vibes. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the note in my koi pond. But Brenda wasn't done. The next morning, she marched down the street, clipboard in hand, trying to rally neighbors for an emergency HOA vote to ban bamboo retroactively. Most of the neighbors closed the door as soon as they saw her. A few humored her long enough to grab a cookie from her Tupperware container before declining. Word spread fast. Brenda was trying to declare war on plants, and most of the neighborhood had zero interest in joining her crusade. In fact, something surprising happened. One by one, neighbors began to express quiet support. The Millers down the block left a bag of organic fertilizer on my porch. The retired couple across the street gave me a thumbs up every morning. Even old man Harold, who once threatened to sue a teenager for parking too close to his mailbox, whispered, "Good luck," as I walked by. Apparently, Brenda had been a thorn in everyone's side for years. My bamboo was becoming a silent uprising. A few days later, Brenda escalated. I discovered footprints in the soil around my bamboo patch, subtle but fresh. Then I found a piece of broken plastic hidden beneath one of the stalks. Upon closer inspection, it was part of a drip tube, the kind landscapers use for root-targeted herbicide. My stomach dropped. Someone had tried to poison the bamboo. Thankfully, the attempt failed. The plants were healthy, stubborn, and growing faster than ever. But I wasn't about to let this go. I checked my doorbell camera footage, rewound to the early morning hours, and there it was, grainy but clear, Brenda's landscaper, crouched at the edge of my property, sticking something into the soil before scurrying off like a raccoon caught in headlights. I uploaded the clip, threw in some dramatic background music, and posted it on TikTok with the caption, "When HOA Brenda tries to commit plant murder." The video exploded overnight. It started with a few thousand views, then 10,000, then 100,000. Comments flooded in from across the country, people cheering for the bamboo, roasting Brenda's landscaping logic, and even offering legal tips. A popular gardening influencer stitched the video, calling it the most satisfying revenge planting I've ever seen. I woke up the next day to find a local news van parked near the cul-de-sac. They wanted an interview. I declined politely, but that didn't stop them from running a segment titled, "Bamboo War Divides Peaceful Suburb." They showed a blurred-out image of Brenda pacing angrily on her lawn like a general losing ground. I couldn't stop laughing. That same evening, Brenda tried to hold an emergency HOA meeting. Only 2 people showed up, her cat-loving neighbor friend, Fran, and a raccoon that wandered in through the open door. The meeting lasted 15 minutes, during which Brenda screamed into the void while Fran crocheted in the corner. Her motion to ban bamboo and all aggressive plants failed due to lack of quorum. Another loss for the Beige Brigade. But it wasn't just that Brenda was losing. It was how fast she was losing control. The bamboo, now well over 8 feet tall, cast a permanent shadow over her side garden. Her prized hydrangeas, deprived of sunlight, began to wilt. Her solar lights wouldn't charge properly. Her morning yoga sessions, once conducted on a pristine stone path bathed in golden sunlight, were now performed in the gloom of emerald stalks. She looked more and more rattled every day. The neighborhood watched in silent amusement. Still, I wasn't done. There was a beauty in letting the bamboo grow just a bit more each day, a slow, satisfying counter to every rushed HOA notice she had ever printed. My plan wasn't about ruining her life. It was about restoring balance. She had ruled the block through fear and paperwork. I was simply letting nature take its course. And nature, it seemed, was winning. By week 3, my yard had transformed into a towering bamboo fortress. The stalks had surpassed 10 feet and showed no sign of slowing down. Every morning, I would wake up to a slightly taller wall of green stretching higher, like nature itself was mocking Brenda. The once open view between our properties was now completely blocked, and I was pretty sure her roses were entering some kind of botanical depression. The bamboo whispered in the breeze, and I swear it sounded like laughter. Brenda, however, was not laughing. She had officially entered meltdown territory. Her daily routine had morphed into a full-time surveillance operation. She stood by her window in a sun hat far too large for indoor use, peering out through binoculars as if she expected the bamboo to sprout arms and start dancing. Her Facebook page became a ranting ground filled with blurry photos of my yard and lawn, grammatically questionable posts about how lawless jungle behavior was infecting the neighborhood. The best part? The comments were all supportive of me. Neighbors who had once been afraid to display garden gnomes were now speaking out. Mrs. Chong, 2 houses down, planted a patch of wildflowers that looked suspiciously unregulated. The Peterson kids painted their fence bright blue. Even Mr. Whitman, who used to mow his lawn every other day, let his grass grow just a little higher, claiming he was reconnecting with nature. A quiet rebellion was brewing, and I had accidentally become its leader, all thanks to Brenda. But things escalated fast when Brenda filed a formal complaint with the county inspector, not just the HOA this time. She went full government. She claimed the bamboo was environmentally dangerous, structurally unstable, and, most ridiculously, an exotic plant species with a known tendency to incite wildlife aggression. I didn't even know what that meant. Was she suggesting squirrels were going to unionize under the shade of my bamboo? The inspector showed up on a Monday morning, clipboard in hand and confusion in his eyes. He walked around the yard, measured a few stalks, checked for signs of root damage, and looked generally bored. Brenda stood behind him like a furious shadow, occasionally pointing at the sky and shouting things like, "That one's nearly 12 feet," and his weaponizing greenery. The inspector just nodded politely, scribbled a few notes, and told me everything was fine. Absolutely nothing illegal, unsafe, or in violation of any zoning ordinance. He even complimented the landscaping. Brenda looked like she might actually pop a blood vessel on the spot. I thought that would be the end of it, but I underestimated just how deep Brenda's obsession went. 2 days later, she staged what I can only describe as a protest. She stood on her front lawn holding a handmade sign that read, "Say no to bamboo tyranny." Her cat sat beside her in a stroller, wearing a matching bandana. She marched up and down the sidewalk alone, muttering loudly about property values and the sanctity of subdivision guidelines. I watched from my porch, eating popcorn and trying not to laugh out loud. Then came the landscaper incident again. Only this time, I was ready. I had installed a second camera hidden in the birdhouse overlooking my bamboo patch. That night, just after midnight, I caught the same landscaper creeping into my yard, this time armed with a pair of shears. He managed to snip off a few low-hanging leaves before being blinded by my new floodlight system, which kicked on with motion detection. He tripped, fell into a planter, and ran off into the darkness. The next morning, I edited the footage, added dramatic music and slow-motion effects, and uploaded it with the caption, "Brenda's henchman returns. Bamboo. 2. Trespassers. 0. The internet went wild again. Comments poured in. "This is better than Netflix, and this man deserves a medal." Local media caught wind and sent another crew out. This time, I gave a short interview, keeping it simple. I explained my peaceful intentions, the legality of the bamboo, and my right to landscape as I pleased. The segment aired that evening, and Brenda's meltdown reached new heights. She attempted to file for a restraining order against me. Her complaint claimed I was mentally harassing her through strategic plant deployment. The judge, who clearly had better things to do, dismissed the case without a second glance, but not before rolling his eyes at her 27-page document titled, "The Bamboo Conspiracy." It included diagrams, weather charts, and a section devoted entirely to her theory that the bamboo was blocking radio signals to her TV. It was at that moment I realized something. Brenda wasn't just overbearing, she was unraveling. But the biggest surprise came when the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Apparently, Brenda had demanded a rule change. She wanted all bamboo banned, cut down, and replaced with non-aggressive ground cover. I attended the meeting out of curiosity, expecting the usual rubber stamp approval. But what I found instead was a room full of frustrated neighbors. One by one, they spoke up, not against me, but against Brenda. Mr. Whitman complained about her endless complaints. Mrs. Chung said she'd been harassed about her flower colors. The Petersons revealed Brenda had once measured their lawn chairs for excessive reclining angles. For the first time, the board listened. They reviewed the original HOA charter and made a shocking discovery. Brenda was never officially elected president. She had simply declared herself so at a neighborhood barbecue 3 years ago, and everyone just went along with it out of fear or apathy. The room went silent. Then someone started clapping. Then more joined in. Within minutes, a vote was cast to dissolve Brenda's leadership and hold a proper election. She stormed out of the room, red-faced and furious, threatening to move out and never return to this botanical nightmare. I, of course, was nominated to run for HOA president, though I politely declined. Leading a plant revolution was one thing. Managing pool cleaning schedules and garage sales was not in my wheelhouse. The next morning, I noticed something poetic. The bamboo, now tall and majestic, had grown in such a way that Brenda's front yard was entirely shaded. Her solar lights flickered weakly, her flowers drooped, and the once gleaming stone path looked dim and forgotten. It was as if nature had decided to hand down its own verdict. And just like that, the neighborhood changed. People started planting more freely. Lawns became colorful, unique, expressive. The HOA became less of a dictatorship and more of a friendly suggestion box. As for Brenda, she kept to herself mostly, her window curtains pulled tight, the occasional glare visible between the blinds. She had lost her power, her voice, and most of all, her view. But the bamboo? The bamboo was just getting started. The calm didn't last long. Brenda might have lost her self-appointed HOA throne, but she wasn't the type to go quietly into suburban obscurity. I should have known she had one last ridiculous card up her beige cardigan sleeve. I was sipping tea on my porch one afternoon when I saw a man in a suit walk up my driveway. He wasn't a delivery guy or another reporter. This one had the stiff posture and briefcase of someone who enjoyed paperwork a little too much. He introduced himself as a process server and handed me an envelope with my name printed in bold. Brenda had officially filed a lawsuit. I stood there on my porch, flipping through pages of printed nonsense. She was suing me for emotional distress, property devaluation, and what she referred to as visual intimidation via Flora. The filing was real, submitted to the local court, and everything. She even included a list of demands: immediate removal of all bamboo, reimbursement for sun damage to her hydrangeas, and an apology letter signed by me and notarized. She claimed the bamboo had cast such a large shadow over her front lawn that it had turned her mornings into metaphorical midnight and robbed her of joy. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. At first, I thought the judge would toss it out instantly, but unfortunately, the system requires even the most absurd claims to be processed properly. So, I found myself preparing for a real court date. I hired a lawyer, my cousin Vince, who also happens to be a part-time comedian and full-time courtroom junkie. When I handed him the paperwork, he nearly choked on his soda. He flipped through it, chuckling, and said, "Buddy, this isn't a lawsuit. It's a sitcom episode with a filing fee." The court date was set 2 weeks out. Word spread fast. Everyone in the neighborhood was buzzing. People offered to testify, submit character references, even bring snacks to court. Someone printed shirts that said, "Free the bamboo." On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Brenda showed up with a color-coded binder, tin tab dividers, and a stack of photos showing my bamboo from every possible angle. I walked in with Vince, 2 bamboo leaves as bookmarks in our copy of the HOA handbook, and the smug confidence of someone who knew justice was about to laugh. Brenda opened with a dramatic speech about how her life had become an endless shadow of torment. She even brought a small desk lamp to demonstrate how little sunlight reached her begonias now. The judge raised an eyebrow. Vince leaned over and whispered, "He's already over it." When it was our turn, we presented the footage of the landscaper sneaking into my yard, the printed HOA threats, and the full printout of the original HOA rule book, authored, of course, by Brenda herself. The moment that broke the courtroom was when Vince showed a side-by-side comparison of her yard pre-bamboo and post-bamboo. The only real difference was that she no longer had a direct line of sight into my windows. Her plants were still alive, her property value hadn't changed, and as Vince put it, the only thing that died here was her ego. The judge smirked and dismissed the case on the spot. No damages, no restrictions, not even a warning. He even added that perhaps Brenda could benefit from a little more shade in her life. Brenda stormed out of the courtroom, binder clutched to her chest. And that might have been the end of it, if she had just let it go. But of course, she didn't. 2 nights later, around 1 a.m., I heard a strange rustling outside. I assumed it was the wind or maybe a raccoon, but when I checked my camera feeds, I saw something incredible. Brenda, in black sweatpants, a hoodie, and gardening gloves, sneaking into my yard with a pair of pruning shears. She looked like a burglar in a home improvement commercial. She tried to cut down one of the smaller bamboo stalks, but got tangled in the leaves. In her panic, she lost a shoe and ended up falling flat on her back in the mulch. She lay there for a few seconds, then scrambled out, hopping on one foot, dragging the shears behind her. I downloaded the footage, posted it online, and titled it, "Brenda's Midnight Gardening Adventure." It went viral in less than 8 hours. Memes popped up, someone auto-tuned her fall and made a remix. Another person painted a mural of Brenda mid-shears titled, "The Fall of Shade." The internet did what it does best, turned chaos into comedy. The next day, I got a visit from the local fire department. Apparently, Brenda had called them, claiming she was trapped in a hostile garden. They found her standing at the edge of her driveway, pointing dramatically at my yard. When the firefighters arrived, they saw nothing dangerous. One of them took a selfie with the bamboo and posted it with the caption, "Most peaceful emergency call of my career." Brenda was humiliated yet again, and now the entire town knew her name, not for her roses, but for her war with plants. A week later, the HOA held their first fair election. No surprise, Brenda didn't run. I was nominated again but politely declined, choosing instead to support my neighbor Rebecca, who promised to lead with common sense and fewer laminated threats. Rebecca won by a landslide, and her first order of business was to establish the Grow What You Love amendment. From that moment on, homeowners were allowed to plant whatever they wanted, as long as it wasn't toxic, illegal, or made of plastic flamingos that played music. To celebrate, the neighborhood threw a garden party. Everyone decorated their lawns with their favorite plants, from lavender to lemon trees. I trimmed my bamboo into artistic arches, lit up the path with soft lanterns, and served iced tea under the tallest stalks. Neighbors gathered, laughed, shared stories about their own Brenda encounters, and reveled in the feeling of freedom. Brenda, of course, didn't attend. She sat behind her blinds, occasionally peeking out as children ran past her house waving little green flags. But the final cherry on top came when I received a letter from a local magazine. They wanted to feature my yard in an article about creative urban gardening. They loved the concept, the transformation, and most importantly, the story behind it. The headline was perfect, from grass to greatness. How one man grew peace and bamboo in the face of HOA tyranny. I laughed, accepted the interview, and made sure to thank Brenda, indirectly of course, for being the inspiration behind it all. By the end of the month, the bamboo had reached 15 feet. It swayed gently in the wind, towering with pride, a green monument to patience, persistence, and the poetic justice of letting nature do the talking. Brenda hadn't spoken a word to me in weeks, but that was fine. The silence was the sweetest revenge of all. 6 months later, the bamboo had not only survived, it had thrived, towering over 20 feet now. The leafy stalks had become a local landmark. Tourists didn't come in droves or anything, but neighborhood walkers often paused to admire it, snapping photos or just basking in its rustling calm. It had transformed my once simple yard into something out of a Zen painting. Birds nested in the upper branches, squirrels treated it like their personal amusement park, and for me, it had become more than a symbol of revenge. It was serenity rooted in defiance. Brenda, meanwhile, had faded into the background like a discontinued wallpaper pattern. Her front yard, once the centerpiece of our neighborhood's obsessive lawn culture, was now an empty, sun-deprived patch of sterile grass and withered hydrangeas. Gone were her roses, her garden gnomes, her absurdly proportioned stone fountain. They'd either died from lack of sunlight or been packed up in defeat. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of her behind her blinds, staring at the wall of green that had ended her suburban reign. She rarely came outside now. Her once frequent walks had dwindled into quick trips to the mailbox and back. Her eyes, once always scanning for rule violations, now just avoided contact. But her house was still there, a constant reminder of the war we had waged, my bamboo and I versus Brenda's crusade for cosmetic conformity. Then came the for sale sign, subtle at first, tucked near the mailbox, almost apologetic. Then bolder, she added balloons, a QR code, a desperate tagline. Charming home with peaceful neighbors and a unique view. It was laughable, considering the unique view she referenced was the very bamboo she had tried to destroy. One Saturday morning, as I trimmed a few low-hanging leaves, a couple parked their SUV across the street and stepped out with a real estate agent. They did the usual slow walk through the front yard, peeking at the porch, nodding politely as the agent rattled off Brenda's original asking price. Then they reached the edge of the property, turned toward the bamboo, and paused. The woman tilted her head. The man squinted. I smiled and waved. The agent smiled too, clearly hoping to pivot the attention elsewhere. They walked the perimeter in silence, finally whispering something to each other before shaking their heads and heading back to the car. A week later, the sign was gone, along with the balloons, the QR code, and whatever hope Brenda had of escaping her green-walled prison. The listing had been pulled from every major platform. Rumor had it her property just wouldn't appraise high enough anymore. Too much shade, too much vegetative dominance. I didn't even know that was a real term until someone showed me the report. The funny part was, the rest of the neighborhood was blooming, literally. Ever since the HOA rules were revised and Brenda was dethroned, everyone began experimenting with their own yards. The Millers planted a vertical garden of herbs along their garage wall. The Chongs added a koi pond and some lanterns. The Peterson kids built a tiny sunflower maze. The whole block looked more alive than it ever had before. People were outside more, chatting, sharing seeds and cuttings. It felt like we all collectively exhaled after years of holding our breath under Brenda's rule. And me? I doubled down on peace. I added a wooden deck beneath the bamboo with soft lighting and 2 hammocks, a small table for tea, a wind chime that played soft notes when the wind passed through. My moments were sacred now. The sound of rustling leaves had replaced the old tension of clipped grass and distant measuring tape clicks. I read more, thought more, laughed louder. The war had ended, and nature had won. But I still had one last surprise left. I had been working on something quietly in the background. Something petty, yes, but satisfying in the most poetic way. A children's book inspired by the entire ordeal, written during evenings under the bamboo, fueled by memories of laminated threats and clipboard tyranny. I titled it Brenda and the Angry Grass. It was a gentle satire filled with colorful illustrations, a talking bamboo stalk named Bernard, and a power-hungry neighbor who learns the value of letting things grow. My illustrator friend brought it to life, and within weeks, it was printed, published, and online. I didn't expect it to blow up, but somehow it did. A parenting blog picked it up, then a gardening influencer, and before long, I was getting emails from schools asking if I'd do virtual readings. Reviews called it hilarious, insightful, and the perfect moral tale for the over-controlling adult in your life. My favorite part? The dedication page. To anyone who's ever been told their grass is too tall, let it grow. The neighborhood celebrated the book with a small gathering. Kids wore paper bamboo crowns, adults drank lemonade and laughed at the origin story, and someone even dressed up as Bernard the Bamboo. A few neighbors asked for signed copies. I handed out one to each household, wrapped in brown paper with a green ribbon. Everyone loved it. Everyone except Brenda. She received her copy in the mailbox like everyone else. I never saw her reaction, but the very next day, her trash can was suspiciously full of shredded paper. Maybe she read it, maybe she didn't. Either way, the message was delivered. Months passed, and things settled into a new normal. Brenda remained quiet, a ghost of her former self. My bamboo stood tall, unwavering. The HOA ran smoothly under Rebecca's leadership. The neighborhood had become what it was always supposed to be: calm, friendly, a place to actually live, not just maintain appearances. And then one afternoon, I found something taped to my door, a handwritten note, short, no envelope. It simply said, "I still think your grass is too tall. But the bamboo. It's kind of pretty." No signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I read it twice, smiled, and tucked it into my journal. Maybe that was her way of surrendering, or maybe it was a truce. Either way, it was enough. As the sun began to set, casting long golden rays across the towering bamboo, I sat in my hammock and let the wind carry away the last remnants of conflict. The leaves swayed, the chimes sang, and peace, true lasting peace, settled over my lawn like dew at dawn. In the end, I didn't win because I fought back. I won because I let things grow. Because sometimes, when faced with tyranny, you don't need to shout. You just need to plant something that can't be stopped, something that reaches for the sky no matter how many times someone tries to cut it down. Something wild, something green, something like bamboo.